It is my pleasure to have Kristan Higgins on, New York Times best-selling author in the romance division.
Yes, thanks,
so
Ann.
thank you so much for coming on. So I always like to look under the hood of the guests that I have on as to what makes you do what you do. You're married to a firefighter, you have 2 children. When did you put pen to paper and say, I think I'm gonna write a book? And did you start out writing romance?
Well, I started writing when my kids were really little, and I was a stay-at-home mom. I had worked here in New Haven in advertising, and I was a copywriter, and then I wanted to stay home and have the whole mommy experience. So that was wonderful and completely rewarding, and I'll never regret it.
I'm gonna hear comma, but.
Exactly. But, you know, my days were spent around Sesame Street and building block towers and going to tot time at the library. And I started to get kind of lonely for grown-ups. And my daughter started nursery school and my son was right behind her. And I thought, I'd really like to stay home, but I also want to do something, you know, something to contribute to the finances of our household and something to keep my brain occupied on more than just the kids.
Folding
and
diapers or
home.
whatever it is,
Yes,
right?
exactly. So I had always read romance novels since I was 13 years old, and I just loved them. And I thought, I bet I could write one. You know, I've had some writing experience, and I'll give it a try.
What kind of guts did that take, though, to say, you know what, I'm going to write a romance novel?
Well, it was easy to start. It was much harder to finish, you know, because I thought, yeah, I'll write a book. And I mean, everybody wants to write a book, and everybody, you know, I think they say 9 out of 10 people want to, and then, you know, 5 out of 10 try, but only 1 out of 10 actually finishes. And, you know, the odds go down and down, further up the food chain you go. So I thought, you know, I'll give it a try, you know, and I gave myself a timeline before our son started 1st grade. If I hadn't sold a book, I would go back to the advertising agency, which was a wonderful job. And so that was kind of good to have a ticking clock, you know.
So how long did it take you to write the first book?
Well, I started to write a historical romance that was really, really bad, but I loved to read historical romance. And I thought, you know, how hard could it be? I'll give it a shot. So I started to write a romance set in Ireland. My husband's family is from Ireland. And I set it during the potato famine, because what could be more cheerful and exciting?
Brings it home,
right?
Yeah.
So I got about 100 pages into that book, and I thought, okay, stop. This is crazy. Even you don't want to read it, Kristan, let alone anybody else. So I thought, well, then I'll try romantic comedy, because who doesn't like to read a book that's funny and makes you laugh? And at the time, there were a lot of books out there about very remarkable people, like billionaires, and vampires were just coming into popularity. And there were a lot of Navy SEAL heroes and military heroines. And I thought, you know, I'm none of those things. I'm not a billionaire, I'm not a vampire.
But you can pretend to be all of that.
Right. But I wanted to write a story that was a little more down to earth. That was about people like me and my husband and working class people, people like my sister.
From small towns, that's what you're known
Right,
for, small
yes.
town romance.
Right. You know, I didn't live in Manhattan. I mean, I did for a little while, but at the time I didn't. So Sex and the City was very popular. If you were writing that genre, you generally had these heroines who wore Jimmy Choos and were really fabulous. And I thought, what about us, you know, the rest of us? Don't we get a big story too, a big, memorable, wonderful, warm-hearted story? So that was my goal in writing my first book. And so it took me about 6 months to write the first draft.
And how did you write?
I wrote on the computer.
On the computer,
Yeah.
late at night, everybody's
nap time,
sleeping?
actually.
Oh, nap time with the kids.
Yeah,
Okay, that's
yeah.
good.
And then as they got a little bit older, a friend of mine would take my toddler for a day when my daughter was in kindergarten, and then the next week I would take her daughter. So whenever I could, you know, whenever I had a little time, I would sit down at the computer, and it was just a joy, because it wasn't doing laundry, and it wasn't stacking blocks and reading Goodnight Moon, and those things I can't,
All
you know,
important too,
wonderful,
but this,
important.
this was you.
Yeah.
So you write the book, it takes you about 6 months.
Yeah.
Now, how does one peddle this? And are you afraid no one's going to publish this?
Yeah. Absolutely. You know, I wrote it and I thought it was very charming and adorable. And so I thought, well, I think I have to send it out and get an agent because I don't know anything about the world of publishing. And so I sent out 20 query letters, and within 3 weeks, 18 of them rejected me.
Well, there you go.
And 2 of them never got back to me. I'm still waiting to hear from them. So I thought, okay, well, this can't be right. You know, the book's not that bad. And so I tried again, and I started to understand the complexity of the publishing world. You know, my own agent gets over 500 query letters a week. So I had to really make mine stand out. And it was very helpful to come from advertising, where I could be pithy and descriptive and short. And eventually I did get an agent in Manhattan.
And what did they say? It's not juicy enough. This isn't a beach read to me. I don't know if I want to read this on a plane. I mean, how critical were they of you?
They were very complimentary, actually. It started with their summer intern reading it, and then it got passed up to an associate, and then to the big boss, the name on the door. And so then she called me and she said, I think you have a wonderful writing voice and a wonderful career ahead of you, and I'd love to represent you. And I was just so excited. I was literally like trying to be very cool, but I was jumping around our house thinking, someone wants to represent me.
Author.
You know?
So you get you get a 1-book deal, or is it several?
I got a 2-book deal to begin with, and I hadn't written a second book. And she said, don't worry about it, it's all fine. She said, I do have some suggestions for you. So at this point, I had already revised the book probably 8 times, you know, just nitpicking it and going over it. And I thought, really, again? You know, but she knew what she was talking about, and she's a professional in the industry. So I revised it again, and then she submitted it around with the big 6 publishers. And Harlequin Books made me an offer, their mass market division. And my first conversation with my editor was, Kristan, we love it. We're so excited to work with you, but we have to change some things. You're starting in the wrong place. It gets kind of droopy in the middle, and we need you to rethink the ending.
See, that's so defeating. But I guess you've got them hooked.
Right.
So you've got to go.
Right. And they said, we love it. It's just that these are the things that we think, and they've always been very, very much a partner. Like if that sounds right to you, and you feel good about it, that's great. And if you don't, that's fine too. It's your name on the book.
First book title was?
Fools Rush In.
That gets published in what year?
2007.
All right. Then how many books have followed since then? You're losing track, which is really good.
My 12th book comes out. This is my 12th book.
Your 12th book, you have another one coming out in October 2014. Are you pinching yourself?
I know.
You told me you've sold about 1 million books.
Yeah, over 1 million. So it's, and I'm translated into 19 or 20 languages now, sold all around the world. And, it started out as something to do so that I didn't have to go back to work. And then it became more and more of a career. And when I signed my last contract, I realized this will take me through my daughter's high school career. And I started writing when she was in nursery school. So now it's really a career now. It's not just a couple of books or a little part-time job.
Do you think people understand what romance writing is all about?
I don't think so. I think that we're sort of the red-headed stepchild of the literary world. People say, oh, those books, the bodice rippers or housewife porn, we get
50 Shades.
50 Shades, that they're very formulaic. And none of those things is necessarily true. I mean, there is an expectation that your couple will end up together. Just the way in a mystery, there's an expectation that the crime will be solved, the mystery will be cleared up. In a coming-of-age story, the characters will learn something and be wiser and more intelligent at the end of the story. So aside from that expectation of a happy ending or an emotionally satisfying ending, anything goes, and my books are actually very cleanly written. I don't have very detailed
You're not
love
going
scenes.
that far over the edge.
Right. I close the door, that kind of thing. And
sometimes that's sexier.
I think so. Yeah, I get a lot of mail that supports that. I did get a funny fan letter from a lady who said, "I really enjoyed your book. I would like you to turn up the heat, however." I'm 87 years old, and I have to get my jollies somehow.
Oh, Lance, I love this. All right, you've read Gone with the Wind 14 times.
Yes.
Have you read it more than that?
I have read it. I read it 13 times in a row, and twice since then.
Why?
Well, I was in 8th grade when I read it the first time, and I'd never read anything like it. It was such a love story, but it was also, you know, a history lesson. I think I learned more from reading Gone with the Wind than I did in any Civil War class, you know, just the perspectives and the history and the impact on the people. And I was so caught up with that character. I love Scarlett. She's so strong, and she's so brave, and she's so stupid, you know, emotionally speaking. She doesn't know anything about anyone. And then there's Rhett, who's, you know, from the first time he sees her, he knows her, he loves her, and he sticks with her for such a long time. You know, it was just such a
Will you
such
read
a
it
journey.
again?
Oh
and
yeah,
again?
I will.
What about your kids? Do they read like you read?
They're
do.
great readers. Yeah. My daughter always has her nose in a book, and my son has actually written a couple. And my
he sees mom making money, so why not?
Right.
Let me tell you, you live in rural Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
Are you pulling from storylines from neighbors and friends and family? Because I would think that you would have to. Has anybody read one of these and said, "Oh, that's Marge"? I know that's Marge. I mean,
sometimes they do. I mean, I've actually named some characters after friends of mine. There's a recurring character in this series who's my beloved neighbor. But it's funny that sometimes they don't. You know, they'll read a character and they'll think, though, you know, that person was so frustrating and irritating, and I'll think, that's interesting that you say so. You know, and I don't say, and she's based on you. But,
are you ever going to leave this genre? I mean, it's working for you. You're going to stay in it under contract. But do you see yourself coming outside of romance at all?
Yeah, I think so. A lot of my books, most of my books have a women's fiction element in it. And the difference between romance and women's fiction is basically the heroine might be older, the romance or the love interest is not quite so central to the story, but it's still there. And they're dealing with issues like parents, maybe elderly parents or teenage children, jobs, and those are the things that I love to incorporate into my books.
Sure.
So yeah, I think we'll be seeing a couple of women's fiction from me in the next couple of years.
And how much of you is in? And I mean, I don't think that you can be a writer and not put you in there.
Right. That's exactly right. And part of
And are you
me,
exposing a lot of yourself to people? I mean, you kind of have to if you're going to do that.
Yeah, you know, you bleed all over every page, you know. Part of me is in every character. I've written the good, the bad, the in-between. And there are some very personal stories, you know, where there's issues that I've dealt with or that people very close to me have dealt with. And you know, whether it's loss or heartbreak or grief, yeah, there's definitely part of me in every book. And I think that's one of the things that readers respond to in any book. If they can relate to that character and it feels genuine, then they love that story.
Speaking of relating to, you refer to yourself as Mrs. Jeter. Why? And you love to whistle.
Yes.
So what's the deal with both of those?
I'm a good whistler in the hailing cab whistling variety. It's a great life skill. You know, I had a horse growing up, and I thought, my horse is going to come when I whistle, and sure enough,
because my
trained
dogs
her.
don't when I call them. So perhaps you could help.
And then, you know, the dogs, the children, the husband, the cabs, you know, they all come for the whistle. I call myself Mrs. Jeter because I'm a big Yankees fan and I love Derek. And I don't think I'm the
What are you
only
going to do when
one.
he's not around?
Well, you know, I don't know. He actually is going into publishing, so we'll see.
Oh, I see. So you can arrange a meeting at some point along. And I know your
hoping.
husband is just fine with all of
He's very
this.
secure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Kristan Higgins, thank you so much for coming on and sharing some of your secrets about how you write and who you are. You are so down to earth.
Thank you.
And
Thanks.
I can't wait to read more. And the next one's coming out in October, and
Yes.
the title is?
In Your Dreams.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Anne.
Appreciate it. you.